Hey, it's Martavis Bryant, a.k.a. Martin McBride.
Hey, this is Fred Jackson.
This is Hall of Famer Marshall Falk.
Hey, this is Allen Robinson.
Hey, this is Amir Abdullah.
Hey, this is Willie Sneed. Hey, this is David Johnson.
Hey, yeah, this is Christian Michael. Hi, this is Eric Dixon, NFL Hall of Famer, and you listen to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast, coming to you from the FantasyJocks.com studios with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
Welcome into the show. It's Tuesday. You know what that means?
That it's
tacos.
Oh,
we're gonna eat tacos.
Don't tempt me with a good time over here.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
I love tacos.
Tacos are delicious. Tacos, burritos, quesadillas.
Stop.
Chicken tacos. It's
Every
all
kind
good.
of Welcome to the Taco Tacoers.
I'll be back later, guys. I got to get going.
Welcome into the show. It is Taco Tuesday, June 6th, 2017. Great show for you today. We are jam-packed. We have a bunch of fantasy football news, a great quick question, some fallout after a big release happened this past week, and a ton more. We'll get into some mailbag questions. Very excited. Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, Mike the Fantasy Hitman Wright are here. The website's thefantasyfootballers.com. And I'm excited to get started, guys. First, I do want to give a quick shout-out.
Yes.
We had the UDK release, and we also had one of the long-term Foot Clan members, Captain Sink from jointhefoot.com. He reached out, and dare I say he insisted on buying us barbecue to celebrate the UDK.
And he also added on a rack of ribs I would not have requested. And those were delicious. Thank you, Captain Sink.
Well, Captain Sink was single-handedly the reason for a productivity drop.
It was a disaster.
In the afternoon of June 1st.
I was going to say, he purchased us
It was awesome.
3 waking naps. 3 waking naps. No, but thank you very much. We wanted to say thanks to everybody who pre-ordered and bought the Ultimate Draft Kit and supported the show. The feedback has been great thus far.
And we're still adding to it.
Oh,
there's
there's
cool
something.
stuff coming, man.
Yeah,
cool
there
stuff.
is. There is. So, all right, quick question of the day, guys. Big surprise happened this past week.
Which I want to say real quick. A big surprise happened, and I hate this big surprise because it covered up the news of the week last week, which we will get to, but
Yes.
it got bumped down.
No, and it kind of – it's just ironic because one was really tied into you and one was really tied into me. I am a big Dirty Cake fan. I am speaking of Jeremy Maclin, always have been. Jeremy Maclin, a surprise release from the Kansas City Chiefs this past week, was running with the first teams. Alex Smith is said to have been, quote, shocked at the release. This was not a result of injury, although last year was an injury-plagued year for Jeremy Maclin. And so, he missed weeks 9 through 13 last year. What is the fantasy fallout of the Maclin release? I wanted to jump in real quick and just set some context and what I believe this move means, and then toss it to you to talk about not only Maclin leaving, but the other players that are affected and where Maclin might go. The writing was on the wall for this move when the Kansas City Chiefs decided to trade up and select Pat Mahomes in the draft. If you looked at when they had 72 guys under roster or under contract, they had $3.51 million of cap space. That's the second lowest total in the league, basically exactly tied with the Los Angeles Rams as of today, according to the NFLPA's website. So they don't have cap room. And this went Maclin's direction. Big money for Maclin. I'm sure he would have been very productive this year. Very productive as he has been in that offense. But this means there's a change happening in Kansas City to me. And this gives me encouragement for guys like Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt and Pat Mahomes. It gives me fear for the existing regime, which would have been Maclin and Alex Smith and anybody else that is Spencer Ware to a degree. Do you know Spencer Ware's current contract situation?
I can look it up for you.
Tell me how far he's under contract.
Through 2018. He'll be an unrestricted free agent in 2019.
So he's still under contract for next year. For how much?
$2 million.
Okay.
So it's not
So
bad.
he may not be heading anywhere. But
I'll tell you who is. Almost identical contract, Sharkhandrick West.
yeah.
Also has a $2 million hit for 2018. Unrestricted free agent in 2019.
I'll say one last thing and then ask the fantasy questions. If I was a Chiefs fan, I would be happy. And that's what I'm going to say. I would be happy because they looked at what they had and they decided we can go into the next 2 years with a bad cap situation and no realistic chance to win a Super Bowl with Alex Smith, which is what I believe they decided. Or they could begin the process of changing. They drafted Kareem Hunt, traded up for him, traded up for Pat Mahomes, and said, let's build – look, what is one of the biggest advantages in the NFL? A young, practically free quarterback, which is what you get in the draft. You saw it with Russell Wilson and what that afforded the Seahawks the ability to do. So fantasy-wise, Maclin's out the door. All of a sudden I think we all would have viewed him as the one still.
Oh,
absolutely.
absolutely.
In Kansas City. So the number one wide receiver is out the door. What does this mean for Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Alex Smith, Chris Conley, Albert Wilson, the fallout of losing the number one and the depth chart?
I'll jump in here. And if you were on Twitter at all this weekend, you could have just renamed it Tyreek Twitter because that's all everything was. I did move Tyreek up, but I had him buried, and he's still a high-end wide receiver 3 for me. What I was concerned about for Tyreek was, will the usage actually go up? I know they talked about it, but Jeremy Maclin was still the wide receiver 1 for that team. I don't know, or I'd say I don't believe that Tyreek Hill can be a wide receiver 1, command what Jeremy Maclin can over the course of a year. Yeah, he can have these huge games, these big plays, but if we're looking for fantasy purposes, I think Maclin's numbers just spread them out to Tyreek, Chris Conley as far as the wide receiver position. It's a big bump for me for Travis Kelce when it comes to dependability. When Kelce started his sensational run down the stretch, that's when Jeremy Maclin was out. When he rattled off, I believe it was 4 straight 100-yard games. That Jeremy Maclin was out for 3 of those, was his first game back for the final one, and that's been the complaint for Travis Kelce. It's not the ability, it's just usage, it's targets, and I believe the team saw what Kelce did last year, and they said, we can move forward with this without Jeremy Maclin, and our offense can still function at the level that we want it to.
Yeah, I agree with that in the sense that, you saw in week 12, or actually week 11, that was 2 weeks after Jeremy Maclin went down. That is when Kelce really took over.
When the run started.
And he looked great. I think I did bump Travis Kelce up. It didn't change him in my rankings because he was already kind of established where he was in a tier.
Where do you have him?
I think he's my 3 right now.
Okay.
And so I love Travis Kelce. When it comes to Tyreek Hill, which is really what most people want to know, I mean, like you said, Twitter was exploding, and I think people are probably overdoing their Tyreek Hill love. My initial reaction was like, wow, with Maclin out of the way, Tyreek Hill is going to have to, it's one of those things where they can say they're going to involve him more, but they might not. Now they have to. So I know they're going to involve him more. I disagree with you in the sense that I believe that Tyreek Hill has the tools and the ability and the talent, the route running, to actually be a successful wide receiver 1. What he doesn't have right now is the quarterback to do that with Alex Smith. There's a reason why we called Jeremy Maclin a really good wide receiver, the dirty cake.
Yeah.
And it was because he was actually limited by this offense and by Alex Smith. And we saw that, while he was in Kansas City. He was not a great fantasy asset. And so I see Tyreek Hill taking over that one spot as a wide receiver, and I don't value that spot much. In a dynasty league, I think this is good news for Tyreek Hill. But if we're just talking a redraft league, it's Chris Conley could surprise. But, I mean, all of those guys, I'm not super excited about any of them that aren't named Travis Kelce. The best fantasy asset here is probably going to be Jeremy Maclin.
Yeah, not if he goes to Buffalo.
I agree there. But if he goes to the Ravens.
And we'll shift and talk Maclin for a second because there are some great destinations. Matt Harmon's reception perception, if you look at it inside the Ultimate Draft Kit and you look at the success rate versus coverage for Tyreek Hill last year, it was very good on the majority of his routes. I think he impressed in that regard. And I agree with you. There's really no way that losing Maclin does anything but benefit Hill, whether you decide that's marginal or large. I mean, the snap counts for Tyreek Hill compared to his production last year were insane. So the snap count's going to go up. Production can go up. What I've had a problem doing and what I've exchanged with listeners on Twitter about is everybody wants to bump up. To me, I saw the reaction even more with Travis Kelce as well because he was the number one tight end last year. Now you bring him in this situation and, oh, my goodness. I know you can't bank on a quarterback change 3 quarters through the season when you're struggling in your division, but that risk is factored into how I think about both of those players. I do worry about what things look like for Kansas City 3 quarters of the way through the year. Maybe I'm vastly underrating their willingness to ride Smith and Ware and what they have, and they just wanted to cut Maclin. But I do worry about that. I don't think you trade up and draft a guy number 12 if you're not willing to make a change when it's necessary.
Yeah, but they were in the playoffs.
They were
last year.
So why draft Pat Mahomes?
For the future.
Right. And I get that. I mean, they were a very good team last year. I love the Chiefs. But they obviously are going in a different direction for the future too.
Yeah, but that's if you see a guy you say this is a franchise quarterback, Alex Smith is coming to the end of his contract. Alex Smith is who he is at this point of his career, so why not take a guy and if you have the luxury of letting him actually sit for a year, quarterbacks do not get to do that anymore. If Pat Mahomes does, that's even better for his career trajectory.
Let me ask you a question. Are the Chiefs better than the Raiders?
No.
Yeah, it's
probably a no.
Probably
right?
a no.
Are the Chiefs better than the Denver Broncos?
I would say yes.
Yeah, better or at least equal.
Yeah, equal. I mean,
are they better than the San Diego or the Los Angeles Chargers?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the Chargers are
all four of those.
Division
That's going to be a tough.
Intense.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Okay. Jeremy Maclin, where do you believe he lands? What is his? It's never a good thing to be in this situation and then land someplace and expect great fantasy production. That being said, there is a gaping hole in Baltimore.
Oh, man.
But there are reports of Maclin already talking to Buffalo, being recruited by Shady McCoy.
Yeah, Shady.
Because Maclin said, find me another team that only throws for about 3,000 yards on offense.
If you watch the actual interview where LaShawn McCoy was quoted in talking about that, he's like, it's almost a throwaway thing. He's like, yeah, I did my recruiting. Don't be surprised if he comes.
Well, but he is having preliminary talks with Buffalo.
Yes.
That's a verified report.
The Ravens, to me, make so much sense. What has happened, especially after the loss of Dennis Pitta, their targets are gone from last year, and they have a giant hole. And year after year, they're replacing them with a great aging wide receiver in Steve Smith. Then they did it with Mike Wallace. And now I think they could do that with Jeremy Maclin. And if he goes there, I am not calling him dirty cake. He's straight German chocolate cake. And I love German chocolate cake. Or maybe even a banana cream pie, which is, let's be honest, the best.
The actual cutting of Maclin does bring me joy because I've had to speak negatively about Jeremy Maclin here for years. And I love Jeremy Maclin. I think he is an excellent wide receiver, but the offense has just capped him. So I think Baltimore is very interesting. And I'm going to throw out, maybe sounds a little hometown, but I think the Arizona Cardinals is an excellent landing spot for Jeremy Maclin. Between Fitzgerald moving on, John Brown, we think he's back, but maybe he's not. And behind that, what do you have? J.J. Nelson? You have
No, I agree.
I would love to see Jeremy Maclin in Arizona, especially he'd have fantasy value here as well.
All right, we're going to get into this and that here momentarily, but first we'll kind of follow this up with the rest of the fantasy football news you need to know about.
News and notes from around the league.
Well,
let's get to the real news.
Here's the irony. There it is.
Oh. Yeah!
Back from the dead.
He will never, ever go away. Do not forget that.
Christine Michael has signed with the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah.
He is making the rounds like an old baseball reliever.
My Twitter timeline
He doesn't
exploded.
even – he signs 3-month contracts.
And people want – because when you tout Kristen Michael for this long, people want to know your take. My honest take is let's see him make the 53-man roster first of all.
Step one.
We're in a dynasty league together, and it was like, oh, man, should we look at – it's a deep, deep roster. And
I picked him up in one of my dynasty leagues
but then
because I just dropped him a couple weeks ago.
Would you rather have Robert Turbin or Kristen Michael? And it's definitely Robert Turbin.
Yeah.
So I think realistically, this is not going to be news that actually affects anybody for fantasy.
The dirty cake gets released, the woke one gets signed, and the narrative continues forever. Did you know, another friend of the show, had him on the show before, do you know Fred Jackson's petitioning for a job still?
Yeah, I did see that. I
am sure there are some great coaching opportunities for him. He's a great guy.
Hey, really sad news. Dennis Pitta suffered
a
dislocated hip
for the
during
third
OTAs.
time.
Really just disastrous. 32 years old, third time this has happened, and I would say the odds are severely in favor of the fact that, it's over for Dennis Pitta. I think it should be.
I mean,
if
I was
I'm
going to
him,
say, if I was family of Dennis Pitta, there's no way I could say
surgery,
go back and do it again.
So Dennis Pitta likely gone for the year, maybe gone for good. And Ben Watson, Crockett Gilmore, Max Williams are on the depth chart there in Baltimore. With Dennis Pitta being lost, I believe the number was 345 targets gone from that offense last year.
Yeah, 335 between
there you
Forsett, Juszczyk, Aiken, Smith, Pitta. I mean, those were major targets in this offense, and they are all absent for 2017.
So probably one of the reasons Mike moved Mike Wallace up his board today. Also, Ben Watson, I adjusted him. I moved him up. I had already moved him up a little bit, not knowing how things would shake out there.
I moved him up as well. In our one of the Dynasty League where we managed the team together, we had Dennis Pitta. We made the immediate move of once it came out that his hip was dislocated, we dropped Pitta and we picked up Ben Watson.
Yes. So I recommend doing the same if you're in a league of that sort of depth. Cameron Meredith, Corey Coleman, Jordan Matthews all missing some time right now due to injury. Cameron Meredith is 6 to 8 weeks with a thumb injury.
That's unfortunate.
Surgery not ruled out. It is unfortunate. You kind of need that time, I feel like, if you're a height candidate. Corey Coleman dealing with 2 injuries, sore hamstring, which should be concerning for owners because he dealt with this soft tissue stuff last year. He also landed on the football. We mentioned that on the last show. So he's going to miss some time. And then Jordan Matthews has missed the past week of OTAs due to knee tendonitis. Nothing huge there. Jamal Charles.
Or is that I'm about to be traded-itis?
I don't know. I don't know if he's hanging out with Ryan Matthews over there or not. Jamal Charles progressed to some light drills during running back OTA practice. I only bring him up because I don't feel like we talked to him very much. But he's going to need to move on to medium and heavy drills if he wants to.
Yeah, I need those heavy.
He's going to need to move on to full participation. I mean, that's one of the things. People are drafting Jamal Charles still, as that he could be. He could be something, and this is 2 years running on trying to get back, and he's not healthy right now. That
Don't
news
you feel
basically
the same
says
way
he's not back.
When you see, because Maclin to Buffalo, you have Zay Jones dealing with an injury, and then you got Sammy Watkins dealing with the foot. I mean, you see Sammy Watkins and you go, you feel like you should be getting into camp and he's fine now, but it's not the case.
Yeah.
So, not a lot of high expectations there for Jamal Charles at this time. All right, you guys ready to play a game?
Who am I?
I want to play a game.
Well, we got to play the eating game first, Mike.
Absolutely. Before we jump into the this or that game, want to thank today's sponsor, Omaha Steaks.
Oh.
Delightful. Father's Day is coming. Pops. You got to hook Pops up with something, and Omaha Steaks has you covered. They have this spectacular package for only $49.99. It's a limited time offer. Enter our code FANTASY to get this I got to tell you what's in this box. It is ridiculous.
Take a deep breath, Mike.
Yeah, I got to prepare the lungs for this. 2 filet mignons, 2 top sirloins, 4 chicken fried steaks, 4 boneless pork chops, 4 burgers, 4 jumbo franks, a 12-ounce package of all beef meatballs, 1 pound of fries, 4 caramel apple tartlets, 1 Omaha steak seasoning packet, plus 4 additional burgers free. All this for less than $50. It's absolutely ridiculous. We all love our Omaha steaks. I've got some thawing out right now for when I get home, and I'm gonna grill it up.
Do it.
Because that's what you got to do. So this is what we need you to do.
I'm coming over.
Foot Clan for Father's Day. Go to omahasteaks.com. You enter the code FANTASY in the search bar, and we've had some people reach out and say, what's that code? It's FANTASY. And add the family gift pack to your cart. You're going to save 80%. Grab your dad and fire up the grill.
You knocked over.
Yeah, Bret Hart is down, but he's back.
All right, good. Thanks to Omaha Steaks for supporting the podcast. All right, this or that. Why don't one of you guys lay out how this segment works?
I'll jump
we
in
did this
here.
last year. It's a lot of fun.
I'll jump in here. We're looking at – so the ADP is taking shape, and by our estimation, these are 2 guys you're going to have to make a decision on. You can only get one because of where they're going to be drafted. There's just not a chance you're going to be able to snag both unless people in your league fall asleep. So we're pairing guys in a similar position, and so they're very close in ADP. So we are going to start this off with our first pairing, DeMarco Murray versus Ajayi. You're probably looking at early seconds for either of these guys. If you're on the clock, who are you taking, Murray or Ajayi?
I'm taking DeMarco Murray. I feel the allure of Ajayi, but I'm taking DeMarco Murray. I think that DeMarco Murray has the established high-volume workload as opposed to the current hype train that's taking place in Miami about a high-volume workload. He has done it, not just last year, but years before, and I can't argue with the consistency level of DeMarco Murray. So for me, with this being, a second pick in my fantasy draft, I really like the idea of putting DeMarco Murray on my roster. 280-plus carries is something I think is kind of a foregone conclusion for me.
He was tied for 3rd.
Yes.
In carries.
And he was banged up a little bit.
Right, and he was 10th in those 5-zone carries. I mean, your opportunity to score clearly goes up when you're inside the 5, 7th in receptions. But on the other side, Ajayi was not the starter until week 5, 9th in total touches, 4th in rushing yards. We know he had those 3 200-plus games. But something I thought was interesting when I was preparing for this game, he had 7 carries inside the 5. Damian Williams had 6. And those all came after Ajayi was the starter. So these weren't in the first couple weeks. He snuck them out, padded that stat total before Ajayi took over. Is there any realistic concern for Damian Williams here to be vulturing away touchdowns from Ajayi? I know it sounds absolutely ludicrous, but those are the numbers.
I'm not too concerned. Now, it's kind of similar to other players when you are running an offense that's going to have a lot of opportunity. You might have someone else with a lot of carries. For instance, LaShawn McCoy and Mike Gillislee last year. The Gillislee, the LaShawn McCoy owner was so pissed. It was like,
oh, man, it was the worst.
Why are you giving it to Gillislee? I think at least there you could make the argument that Gillislee is good, whereas Damian Williams, not so much. Sorry, Damian. But I don't worry that Ajayi won't get goal line carries. And that would be the worry, is if you've got a guy coming in that's going to steal all of his opportunity, I would, that's something you have to concern yourself with. But he got, you look towards the end of the year, games right in a row, 2 carries inside the 10, back-to-back.
I mean, the goal line concern, Derrick Henry in Tennessee is great.
Yeah, that's also.
But what differentiates them is I haven't seen, the passing volume go to Ajayi to the degree that it's gone to DeMarco Murray in the past. And Murray basically doubled up on targets to Ajayi last year, had 3 receiving touchdowns compared to 0 for Ajayi. They're very close. And if I was playing on a very upside team, or I was trying to consider things like, hey, Am I going to have this player as a keeper consideration? I don't mind whatsoever you going with Ajayi. I love both of these players this year. This is not a this or that decision that makes me go, one's great, one's bad. This is like good or better to me. And, depending on who I took with that first pick, that might actually determine which of these two guys I take. So not a hard stance by me, but DeMarco Murray on my side before we move on to the next choice here. Jason?
I think I would have to side with Ajayi in this because I think he is heading in the right direction. His arrow to me is pointing up versus DeMarco Murray with Derrick Henry behind him, the arrow slightly pointing down. I like both of these players. This would be the only combo of everybody we're talking about today that realistically you could actually take both because they're going to be around that first, second round turn. So if you are at the 12 spot, you could end up grabbing both of these guys. I would like that. But
would you want to do that?
I would. I would love to have two stud running backs to start. The thing is from week 5 on, when he was the starter last year, Ajayi outpaced DeMarco Murray. I mean, they were both great. DeMarco Murray was the number 7 back from week 5 on. Ajayi was the 5th back.
These are both teams
from week
projected to be potential playoff teams as well. It's close. It's very close. We've got Ajayi up on the wall.
Yeah.
Today.
Oh, so
we do. Where do we get that? That's Pristine Auction. So we want to thank Pristine Auction today as well for sponsoring today's podcast. Pristine Auction. We're going to be giving away a bunch of jerseys this offseason from pristineauction.com, autographed memorabilia. They're great friends of the podcast and have been for a very long time. We've been out to their facility here in Phoenix. It's awesome. Great people, state of the art. Tons of awesome memorabilia, a trusted name in sports memorabilia. You can check out their website, pristineauction.com, Pristine auction.com.
We have 5 jerseys to pick up, by the way.
Oh,
you know it because you guys frequently accuse me of having a problem. And then I pointed out to you
it's not a problem when they arrive.
We have a loyal fan who's like, I just got my 24th autographed jersey, and I said, you, sir, are doing it right.
He's just wearing them. That's his wardrobe now. He goes out in a Ajayi signed jersey.
I'll say one thing. His son's going to community college. All right. Todd Gurley versus Lamar Miller. This or that. Todd Gurley versus Lamar Miller. For me, as opposed to the previous choices, this is like, why would I even think about it? To me.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I agree, but I think we're on opposite sides.
I mean, it's not even a question to me. Even taking the angle that you did with Ajayi and potential, the youth versus opportunity. To me, look, Todd Gurley is the obvious pick for me for ceiling. Look, worst case scenario, I think these guys end up about the same. Best case scenario, Todd Gurley's a top 5 running back in a Sean McVay offense, out from the giant smelly shadow of Jeff Fisher.
That was a shadow.
It's a smelly shadow, Mike.
You're downwind.
It casts both a darkness and an aroma.
Jeff Fisher is such a stinky coach. His shadow is actually scratch and sniff.
Don't
try to take over my stinky aroma joke.
I'm helping feeding you.
You're not helping. You don't need to scratch anything. Just walk around. If you've seen a room that Jeff Fisher's been in, the carpet's starting to curl. All right, look. Todd Gurley.
Sorry, Jeff.
278 for 885 and 6. Well, Jason's already going to be featured on, what was that, the
hopefully.
Maybe.
We'll see. We'll talk about that later.
All or Nothing?
All or Nothing on the Jeff Fisher episode was kind words for Jeff Fisher. 57 targets last year, 43 receptions. Look, you guys looked up a very interesting Todd Gurley stat this past week. Well, we didn't.
We did not.
But Scott Barrett did.
Shout out to my boy, Scott Barrett. He's did a write-up on Todd Gurley.
His shadow smells delightful.
Oh, always. Very fragrant.
Yeah. Lavender.
Thank you. I didn't know where I was going.
No, you never do.
So Scott Barrett, looking some research on Todd Gurley, said there's 320 instances of a running back getting 275 or more carries. This is in the entire NFL. Or since I believe since 2000. Todd Gurley, last year, of those 320, 5th worst yards per carry. And that is historically bad for that volume. In this game where all we want is volume. Give me a guy who's going to actually touch the ball. Todd Gurley was historically bad, but there's some good news. Because of those bottom 12 in yards per carry, 4 of those players were coached by Jeff Fisher.
That's so ridiculous.
I mean, that is just inadequacy at the professional level. Just keep giving a guy the ball and don't worry about calling plays. Just you're like, hey, coach, what's the play? Nah, just run it forward. You're not designing anything.
So all of that said, Mike, you know Andy's taking Todd Gurley. It's not close to him. You said you made it sound like it was close to you. Who are you taking?
You're on the clock.
Oh, good grief. All right, so Lamar Miller, 10th in rushing, 8th in total touches. It was a lack of touchdowns. I guess it was a lack of touchdowns for both of these guys. Todd Gurley was also missing big plays. I'm gonna go Lamar Miller here and hope that the scoring opportunity goes up with Brock Osweiler out of town. I know that's putting a lot of faith in Deshaun Watson, who I have as projected the starting quarterback for Houston. You got to get these carries up inside the 5, though. As I was looking at Lamar Miller, he had 2 more carries inside the 5 than Carlos Hyde, who didn't play an entire season. He had 1 more than Robert Kelly, Terrence West, Kristen Michael, and C.J. Anderson.
Well, yeah, they weren't near the 5 a lot. Brock Osweiler made sure of that.
Just saying, we need to get him. Got to get those 5-yard carries up, get those scoring opportunities. If you're wondering why Lamar Miller only had 5 rushing touchdowns, that is why.
Yeah, so for me, when I look at the argument between Todd Gurley and Lamar Miller, I know I'm a Lamar Miller apologist. He was my guy last year, and for the most part, we feel like he let us down. I definitely would take Lamar Miller here. He's a guy that right now is being undervalued in drafts because of how he finished the season last year. If you just look at the fact that
You're talking about Todd Gurley?
No, I'm talking about Lamar Miller. No, I didn't say play the whole season. I said how he
I
finished.
thought you said like
So here's a good point though. Todd
They're
Gurley
both in
finished
similar situations.
They really are. They're on bad
Lamar Miller
offenses
was far less elusive, but they're both in really bad situations.
Well, neither one were efficient. Nobody's going to
weren't.
argue for the efficiency last year of either of these guys.
If
However,
they'd be in the first round if they were.
If you looked at a career efficiency, Lamar Miller has always been an efficient running back. He got the volume and the efficiency dropped off. So let's say it repeats. Let's say you draft Lamar Miller and once again he gets the volume, because I'm not worried about Deonta Foreman because he's replacing Alfred Blue. There was already an over 100 carry running back there last season. You've got Lamar Miller, worst case scenario, repeating what he did last year, which last year through week 15, he didn't play in week 16 and 17 at all. He was 0 snaps because he wasn't in the game, and he would have finished as an RB1 through week 15. He was the RB16 versus Todd Gurley as the RB15, except he didn't play 2 games. Now, what happens if Lamar Miller's efficiency is actually back even just closer to what his entire career average would be? You're going to have a monster here. And if you've got a guy that's going to be coming in Watson as a running quarterback, that threat has always been a benefit to running teams, especially with high-volume running backs. So I think Lamar Miller is a great value again this year. I trust him more. I think the floor is higher.
Yeah, I don't mind some of your arguments.
Yes.
I mean, but to say he's just this bringing Deontay Foreman in is not just replacing Alfred Blue. Alfred Blue's gonna be there, isn't he? He's not. He's still on that roster. And to say the efficiency, the problem is the volume's not gonna be there anymore. They saw what happened to that kind of volume. So to me, the volume is going down for him. You add Deshaun Watson, you add another element to the running game, you bring in Deontay Foreman. You don't think there's a chance Deontay Foreman is afforded goal line opportunities and Alfred Blue stays with a role on this team? It's not A-B, it's A-B-C.
Sure, I think there is an opportunity for Deontay Foreman to look at goal line carries a little bit more. I do see that.
Goal line carries a little bit more? Like watch them?
Yes, watch Lamar Miller.
No, that's why you draft them.
No, but I don't think
the volume.
I don't think for 1 second that Alfred Blue is going to be a 100-plus carry running back this year while Deontay Foreman comes in and also adds to that. I think you're going to see Alfred Blue pretty much fall off the map here. That's how I interpret the pick.
4.2 a carry last year.
Who?
Alfred Blue. 4.2 on 100 carries. Very efficient. I agree that both have the opportunity to improve. Let's put it that way. Mike, you took Lamar Miller. Jason, you took Lamar Miller. And I took Todd Gurley. LeGarrette Blount versus Mike Gillislee. Reports coming out today about Gillislee having an inside track on the starting running back job.
I haven't even heard this.
The high trade coming through. So LeGarrette Blount, the former starter, now in Philadelphia. Mike Gillislee, both of these guys going in the 6th round right about now. Probably not going to end up with both on your team, though you could now that you get into these further rounds. For me, I'm not a big fan of LeGarrette Blount this year in Philadelphia. So I just don't think you're going to see anything approaching what you saw last year in any way, shape, or form. Volume, touchdowns. He doesn't offer you anything in the passing game. For me, it's Mike Gillislee. Give me the opportunity at something a little bit better. I think Blount probably I think both these guys move up ADP-wise before the drafts. But I'll take Gillislee. What do you guys think?
I think it's a risk versus reward with these guys, right? Because Gillislee, we are projecting that he's going to be the starter, but genuinely, we do not know. Nobody knows what the Patriots are going to do with those carries. You know, they signed Rex Burkhead. They've got a billion running backs. So there's more risk with Gillislee, whereas, you know, Ryan Matthews is going to be out the door and LeGarrette Blount is in. There were touchdowns. Ryan Matthews had, I think, 8 touchdowns rushing last year in limited work. So the risk might be less with LeGarrette Blount, but the reward to me is not close. The reward of LeGarrette Blount would be he gets 200 carries and close to double-digit touchdowns, which would be fine for drafting him. You're not going to be disappointed if you get him, but that's the ceiling to me. Whereas Gillislee, if he does take over that role that ironically LeGarrette Blount is leaving as that goal line back, with his skill set in the passing game, with his efficiency in all sorts of running formations, I think Gillislee could be a top 10 back, whereas LeGarrette Blount does not have that opportunity in Philadelphia.
Yeah, what's for where this is interesting, obviously Gillislee's replacing LeGarrette Blount, and to kind of project what LeGarrette Blount is going to do. You can't look at last year at all. You have to look at Ryan Matthews, the opportunity Ryan Matthews was given. And it was surprisingly good what Ryan Matthews was allowed to do as far as touching the ball. Inside the 5, Ryan Matthews, in his limited work, was tied for 5th in carries inside the 5, 16. 4 of the last 5 games that Ryan Matthews played, he had over 15 carries. He was getting volume. Ryan Matthews was simply hurt. So I think that there is a lot of work to be afforded for LeGarrette Blount, and in the 6th round, I would probably be pretty happy to get him on my team. Not if Mike Gillislee is there, because for all the reasons that Jason said, LeGarrette Blount, 18 rushing touchdowns last year. If you give Gillislee, you know, that type of a volume, positive game scripts all the time, he is in what I believe he will take over the LeGarrette Blount role for that team moving into this year, so that the reward is much higher. Now, will Mike Gillislee be there in the 6th round come draft season? I mean, that hype train will get rolling eventually, so he could jump up even a couple rounds. But if it's 6th round, this guy versus that guy, I'm going to take Mike Gillislee over LeGarrette Blount, but I'm not by any stretch crushing LeGarrette Blount. I think he'll be a fine running back too, in a spot where other people are drafting RB3s because they don't want Blount on their team.
I think that's possible, but it's kind of funny to look back at LeGarrette Blount's career and try not to be so affected by recency bias. He has, other than this past year where he had 18 touchdowns and I think 19 of those were from the one, they were all pretty much gimmies thanks to the Patriots offense. The rest of his decently long career for a running back, he has never finished higher than the running back 30 in half-point scoring. So you would have to be saying the Eagles are going to take a good step forward, because while Ryan Matthews did have that opportunity, there were also such weird games for him where it was like he got 2 carries the whole game. They were both inside the 5.
That's fine. I'll take the 5 carries.
But you didn't start him. You couldn't start Ryan Matthews in those weeks. You would have got bailed out by that. So I think there's questions there with LeGarrette.
All right, let's talk about Alvin Kamara and Duke Johnson, this or that. Do you want Alvin Kamara on your roster, or do you want to go with Duke Johnson? Both of these guys currently in the 14th round. In the 14th round, I think both have upside. That's for sure. I like what I saw from an efficiency standpoint from Duke Johnson. There wasn't a lot more than that last year. Could barely score the ball in Cleveland. I probably simply side with the offense in this pick and go with the more explosive Alvin Kamara or Drew Brees-led New Orleans offense. What do you guys think?
Yeah, this is an offense question. Alvin Kamara is likely to rise while Duke Johnson will sit in this ADP area. But here's why I like Alvin Kamara. Last year, the Saints had 163 targets to the running back position. 78 of those, Travaris Cadet, Timmy Hightower, Kuhn, Daniel Lasco, targets that, well, Hightower's completely gone. I think Cadet is usurped immediately with the draft capital the team spent to move up and draft Alvin Kamara. You're looking at a possible situation where Alvin Kamara, the ceiling is Darren Sproles, right? Those years where Sproles was getting 70-plus targets, I don't think I'm envisioning that right away for Alvin Kamara. It's in the realm of possibilities. So that's why I would go with Kamara in this situation.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, anyone want
to stand up for Duke?
I'll stand up for Duke Johnson. I will, because there's still a lot of mouths to feed in New Orleans. I agree with everything you said, and I would prefer to have a Drew Brees-led offense than a Cody Kessler
No,
DeShone Kizer.
Yeah.
DeShone Kizer-led offense. But you've got a guy who's done it before. I mean, Duke Johnson finished as an RB2 his rookie year. And going into last year, he was a 7th-round draft pick. People were talking about him like he was all the hotness. Isaiah Crowell.
All of it.
Isaiah Crowell ended up being the guy to kind of break out. And now Crow's in the 3rd round, and Duke Johnson's down in the 14th while, you've got an upgraded offensive line. The way that I view these two is I don't see a path for Alvin Kamara to finish as a top 20, top 15 running back. If I need a guy in a full-point PPR league who's going to be a necessary flex, I would rather go Kamara. But if I'm taking more of a flyer pick, I think I would actually rather go for Duke Johnson. His path to taking over the whole show, I think, is more realistic. He's one Isaiah Crowell injury away versus the Adrian Peterson, Mark Ingram, Kamara trifecta.
I assume if you have Mark Ingram, Adrian Peterson, Isaiah Crowell, you're drafting the handcuff option here. That would be enough of a difference maker for you. If you have Crowell, you're taking Duke. If you have either of the other guys, you're taking Kamara.
Yeah, simply
as a tiebreaker.
Yeah, maybe, but it's just they have standalone value. That's the only reason I would be willing to draft them.
No, I know. I'm saying if you have one of the other guys on the roster, if you have Mark Ingram, are you drafting Duke Johnson here?
Oof.
Over Alvin Kamara?
I don't
know.
think
but I even if I had Crowell, I'd probably still draft Kamara.
Yeah, I would not. But I think I agree with what you're saying, Andy. I would side on how my draft has gone up to that point.
DeAndre Hopkins, Allen Robinson. Where do you guys sit?
Whew. It's funny how similar these guys are. 150 targets for Hopkins, 151 for Allen Robinson. Massively disappointing. I don't even know where to start on these two guys.
Yeah, it's certainly tough. I am not a huge believer in either of these guys bouncing back to the point of where they're being drafted. But if I have to take one of these two guys, I'm going to side with Allen Robinson, because Allen Robinson in his breakout year did it with Blake Bortles. He has Blake Bortles still. The offense could be even improved by Fournette. There's a narrative there that says it's not just, they're going to become a running team, and so there's going to be less opportunity for Allen Robinson. Maybe they're just a better offense because they can move the ball, pick up the 3rd downs, get near the end zone, and there's more opportunity for Allen Robinson. He's got a quarterback that could get it done. Whereas with DeAndre Hopkins, the argument was, well, it was Brock's fault, and Brock's gone, so now he should be better. But I think, the year prior, he didn't have the greatest quarterback play when it wasn't Brian Hoyer, but a lot of it was Brian Hoyer, who I think does not get enough credit, especially for fantasy football. I do not believe that Tom Savage and a rookie Watson are going to be the fix for DeAndre Hopkins, and I can't imagine taking Hopkins at his ADP right now when he finished. I mean, he's going as basically like the 12th or 13th wide receiver off the board. He finished in the 30s last year and now has just as bad of quarterback situation, in my view, coming into this year. So I would side Allen Robinson if I had to choose between these two guys.
Yeah, I would side with Allen Robinson as well, just by a hair. I think DeAndre Hopkins is incredibly talented. I think he's a top 12 talent in the NFL, and I think he can do it with different quarterbacks and bad situations. But last year, he clearly couldn't do it with enough, with Brock. And while I think it'll be better for him this season, I think Robinson, he's the better talent with Bortles. So I agree with your guys' take on that one. Breshad Perriman, Josh Doctson. I love this one because we talked about the amount of targets on the board in Baltimore. Could mean good things for Breshad Perriman. I think we all know what Mike Wallace is, but we don't know what Breshad Perriman is yet. High draft pedigree, will have an opportunity. He will have every opportunity to be something if he is something, if that makes sense, right?
Oh, yeah.
If he has it, we're going to get to see it. He went through a lot when he started in the NFL. In terms of injury and some other distractions. Those things are gone. So does it matter? He has Joe Flacco, high-volume passer.
At least the last couple years, yeah.
They seem to get some things together towards the very end of the year last year. Josh Doctson, we've never seen him on the field.
Well,
but he has the opportunity.
Couple snaps here.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that correction. Yes, we really haven't seen him on the field. Where do you guys sit with this? I'm going to go with Breshad Perriman myself.
Oh.
As of now, I see this as a really simple, we talked about LeGarrette, Blount, Gillislee being a risk versus reward situation. I see this as a talent versus opportunity. I think Josh Doctson is the more talented wide receiver. And also, I think he has the better quarterback. But the opportunity is clearly more in Breshad Perriman's favor right now. Now, if Maclin were to go and sign, or even Anquan Bolden, if Anquan Bolden goes and signs with the Ravens, and now you've got an incoming threat for a lot of targets along with the outgoing, then that's similar to what Doctson has, with the incoming Terrell Pryor, but the outgoing assets in Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon. So as of today, I would take Breshad Perriman because opportunity trumps talent, and he's going to have the opportunity to show the talent he has. I like them coming out of college, but if the opportunity changes there in Baltimore, which I expect it will, I think Josh Doctson's talent is he's phenomenal. He was my favorite. I guess it was Sterling Shepard and Josh Doctson last offseason coming into the year as to who I really liked at wide receiver.
Both late first-round picks, smaller schools. Breshad Perriman, obviously a deep threat. We saw Torrey Smith have effective fantasy seasons with Joe Flacco on the deep ball. Mike, where do you sit between these two? I think, if I had to guess, I think you're going Doctson.
I am. I lean Josh Doctson. I love the combo of these two guys. It's a mirror situation.
Yeah.
You said they're both first-round picks
young,
in the 20s.
injury-prone.
And both teams have lost about 50% of their targets, even though the Ravens side is a lot more targets. I think that the passing volume for the Ravens does come down a bit. But I'm going to go with Josh Doctson. I'm going to go with the better fantasy quarterback in Kirk Cousins, just a greater touchdown opportunity to me for Josh Doctson.
Does it bother you at all? Weren't there reports, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, that in OTAs the three wide set did not include Josh Doctson? That he was basically being run as the fourth wide receiver?
That would be news to me.
Did anybody else hear this? Sometimes I dream things. I'll vet that, but I'm pretty
It's already
sure I
out
saw
there
that.
now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I
Was that reported by Jason Moore?
I'll move on, and you can go ahead and decide
I'll see if
whether
I
you
can find
really
that.
read that or you pretended to read that. Tyler Eifert, Jimmy Graham, this or that. Tyler Eifert and Jimmy Graham, both 6th-round tight ends right now. Jimmy with the bounce-back season. Tyler Eifert, injury-plagued season, effective while he was on the field. But
Regular season for Tyler Eifert.
What'd you say?
You said it was injury plague, and I said it's just that's a season.
Oh, just a normal
Yes.
season. Look, yeah, but it's hard to compare him to Jimmy Graham, who's been, recovered from a major injury, a little bit older. I'm taking Tyler Eifert. I'm just going to go with the opportunity in an offense that needs red zone targets, what Andy Dalton has with Eifert, and I'm not going to presume another injury with Eifert. I think the effectiveness and a point per game standpoint, Eifert was, when he was on the field, points per, I believe it was target, was above Gronkowski. So if he can be on the field, if he can stay healthy enough, and I do mean enough, I mean 13 games. You can take 3 off if you want. 13 games, I'll take Tyler Eifert.
I have Eifert higher in my rankings, but it's not a huge point discrepancy between Eifert and Jimmy Graham. I know Jason has Jimmy Graham inverse of what I have. I want to hear Jason try and sway me into
Sure.
Jimmy Graham.
Here's what I would say when it comes to Jimmy Graham versus Eifert. One of those players we have seen be a dominant fantasy force for years. Granted, it was with a different team, but we have now also seen him play with the Seahawks and be a true fantasy stud at the position. I mean, he was a top 6 guy for most of the year. As he trailed off for the second half of the year, I mean, if that's a conditioning issue coming off of the horrific injury he had, I completely understand it. I'm not faulting the guy. The fact that he could get back from that injury and recover says to me he's got a far more likely, percentage chance of playing 16 games versus Tyler Eifert. Both of those guys have the same capability of scoring touchdowns. Maybe I give a slight edge to Eifert. The yards are very much, to me, in Graham's favor. But if you look at the likelihood of those guys playing 16 games, to me, it's not even close. It's a 90-10 in favor of Jimmy Graham. So if I'm on the clock and those two guys are there and I want a tight end, which I probably won't, but if I do, I'm going the safer route because I don't see the ceiling that far apart if both of these guys hit.
Tyler Eifert's still hurt right now. So
Yeah, that is true.
Keeping it consistent.
Also, to update, it does appear so this Doctson was sat out the second half of practice the other day. It had, quote, nothing to do with the injury history. So he just wasn't there in the team drills for part of that session on the 31st. So take it for whatever you want.
Oh, I'll take it. I'm not part of that hype train. Never have been. All right, Brandon Marshall versus Kelvin Benjamin. Brandon Marshall, Kelvin Benjamin. This one, for me, in my rankings, it's a no-brainer. It's Brandon Marshall by a lot.
Wow, a lot?
By a lot. I am low on Kelvin Benjamin. You guys have him in your 20s. I got him down, I believe, near the 38, 37 range. It didn't help. Like, that was his ranking before I knew he was overweight. Before I watched him run around like an offensive lineman. To me, the volume and consistency of Kelvin Benjamin, I don't even want to deal with that. I don't even want to think about it. I know targets are going to be there for Brandon Marshall. I do. The targets will be there. So for me, it's Brandon Marshall. It's the talent gap between these two players, even now, is massive to me. And so from those two perspectives, is Kelvin Benjamin going to give a fantasy owner a 3-touchdown game this year? I think he probably will. He'll probably do it. I don't know which game that's going to be, and I'm going to start him 8 times and be upset I did. That's my perspective on those two.
Yeah,
I know you moved Kelvin up today.
Yeah,
so.
they're very close. I have Marshall slightly ahead. Kelvin was too low in my rankings for what he did last year. I'm just not as confident as you are that Brandon Marshall is going to get the targets. I went back the past 3 years looking at the number 2 for the Giants. 2014, it was good old Rube's personal favorite of mine, 127 targets. And Larry Donnell, third option, had 92 targets. 2015, Ruben Randall, 90 targets. Shane Vereen had 81. And last year, Sterling Shepard, the rookie, had 105. And then you had Cruz behind him. I don't know that the targets for Shepard are just going to evaporate and turn into Brandon Marshall targets. So I don't know that he will get the volume he can. It's going to be touchdowns for Brandon Marshall. Meanwhile, Kelvin Benjamin should still be the wide receiver 1 on that team. I know he had lulls, and I've not been the biggest Kelvin supporter, but weeks 5 through 11, he did average 70 yards per game, and he finished strong. Those gaps are bizarre, though, when he just absolutely vanishes. When the wide receiver 1 from a team just vanishes. So I don't blame you for going with Brandon Marshall. I'm starting to lean Kelvin, even though Brandon Marshall is just slightly ahead of my rankings.
I lean Kelvin, but I don't like either one of these guys. I mean, you talk about, upside. At least Kelvin, to me, is the clear one for the team. The market share will be there for Kelvin. I'm not worried about Devin Funchess. Christian McCaffrey obviously will come in and do some pass catching work.
Did you just say something negative about Devin Funchess?
Oh, look, I'm
okay?
not scared about Devin Funchess, but I also like Devin Funchess. That's for another time. Kelvin Benjamin has performed before. I mean, he's one of the very rare rookie wide receivers to finish as wide receiver 1. He'll get the volume. He'll get the touchdown opportunities. I'm more confident in his opportunity than Brandon Marshall's. Now, I think Brandon Marshall's on the way down, but I still like Brandon Marshall's talent far more than the dump truck that we saw in OTAs jogging these routes. I mean, if you haven't seen Kelvin Benjamin at OTAs yet, you got to do yourself a favor and go to Mr. Google and say, help me find fat Kelvin Benjamin.
Come on.
It looks so I think if I ran a route, it's exactly what I would look like.
I've seen you run routes.
I mean, I look terrible. So I don't really love either of these guys.
Andy, you quarterbacked for Jason Moore.
Yeah.
Grade the routes. You saw the Kelvin route. You've seen Jason run routes.
Yeah, he runs a route like a power forward. He runs a Charles Barkley route. He can box him out. He can bring it in. And then he just needs to get downhill momentum.
See, and that's what I think Kelvin Benjamin is. He's a power forward. He's just a box out guy, which works around the red zone.
He's perfect for Cam Newton because Cam Newton can rear back and fire as fast and as wide a catch radius as possible. And Kelvin, he'll catch a few.
Yeah, I think.
But I don't like him. Look, last year was disappointing. Now you add Christian McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel.
Was last year really disappointing for Kelvin Benjamin, or was it last year disappointing because of the first 2 weeks that Kelvin Benjamin gave fantasy
all
owners?
of the above. All of the above. It was certainly disappointing to anybody who went and traded for him as a 1.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
But it was disappointing for all fantasy owners who wanted to see a step forward. We projected before the injury the year before. Look, Kelvin Benjamin is 3 years removed from his rookie season, right? He's going into year 4. So he missed an entire season with the ACL. Came out last year, was somewhat inconsistent. Comes out this year, at least right now, he's dealing with conditioning and weight issues. And if you remember when he was drafted, the concern about him was, does he want to play football very badly?
All right, I'm changing my answer. I'm going Brandon Marshall. Because, look, after those first 2 weeks, do you want to know what Kelvin Benjamin's 16-game pace was? For week 3 on. So, I mean, this is a huge sample.
That was the goose egg, right?
Was
Huge
it similar to
sample
your
size.
pace last season?
Yeah. So it's 57 receptions for 848 yards and 5 touchdowns. Now, could he do better? Obviously. But what we see in him right now, I still have to trust my eyeballs and what he looks like and how he's come into camp. And I can't look at that and go, you know what? He's going to really step it up from last year. I have reason to believe that. I don't.
He
I
comes
have no
into
reason
camp.
to believe
He comes
that.
into camp. He may be the WR1, but they write him down as 2WR. That's his actual. He's 2. All right, we're gonna answer some mailbag questions. We'll go over the clock today. Let's do it.
Mailbag.
You think if you drag and drop him into your ESPN lineup, he fills both slots? No?
You guys
No?
are
You-
savages
You don't
right
want me
now.
to stop? Okay.
Poor Kelvin.
Hey, it bugs me when we make jokes, right? We make jokes about Eddie Lacy and Kelvin Benjamin. The jokes are there not because, want to make light of somebody overweight or something like that. You have to me, with the NFL, you have an opportunity to do something 0.001% of anybody on earth gets to do, and you take the offseason off, and you don't care. And it bugs me as a competitor and as a player. That's the only reason why those things – and,
Yeah, it's your job that you're being paid millions of dollars to do.
Right.
It's not just, hey, look at you, you're ugly.
And it's hard. Look, right. That's true. And it's hard when you watch the shows like, what am I thinking of here? When you watch,
Like the Hard Knocks?
Hard
Okay.
Knocks. When you watch Hard Knocks and you see the wide receiver 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 trying to make the team, and you know they can't make the team over Kelvin Benjamin, but they're the ones working. I don't know. Just bugs me.
All
It's
right.
under my skin.
That's fair.
At least today it does. All right, mailbag. Let's jump in here. If you want to send a question in to the podcast, go to thefantasyfootballers.com. Click the submit a question button or leave us a voicemail hotline, 302-464-TFFB. We're going to answer a voicemail question to start off this segment right now.
And my question is, you guys seem like you would know each other extremely well, doing the show together, knowing each other's rankings and everything. How difficult does that make it to draft against each other? Thanks, guys. Love the show.
It's super annoying. Yeah, it's super annoying because in a draft, one of the fun pieces in a draft is whether players will slide to you in an unexpected way and you get to steal them. And I know that when I draft against these two gentlemen, I most likely will not get to steal the player unless their name is Todd Gurley.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, steal
Yeah,
away.
I would say-
that's not stealing.
I would say that the more you know the other players, the less difficult it gets. Now, in our league, what you're alluding to is absolutely true because the league knows us far better than we know the entirety of the league because they listen to the podcast. They've got our rankings. We're not, like, putting out our own personal rankings in my closet and then the public rankings to everyone else. But I do know when I've gone into a draft, the more I know the other players, like when I do mock drafts that aren't using software, I just use a doc, and I mock draft, I try to draft who I think you would draft and who I think Andy would draft. And it ends up very helpful because I realize who's not going to drop to me. And I think what I'm saying here is get to know your league mates better and who they like and who they don't like. It won't make it more difficult. It'll make it far easier.
Well, it won't make it more difficult to predict, but it'll make it harder for players to fall to you maybe.
Yeah, when you guys
At least for me. I know you guys aren't going to let somebody that we all agree is really good get to me.
Yeah, don't share your opinions. Just get theirs.
And things like sleepers and breakouts, it makes it a little riskier for those guys because we have to reach. I mean, you have your normal, okay, I'm going to reach a round or two for this guy.
Yeah.
Well, now I know that these clowns.
John Brown over here is going to be
Round
drafted.
4, John
I know,
Brown.
I have
That's
to go
right.
nuts.
All right, here's a question that came in from Josh. How to sell PPR to your league. Hey, guys, thanks for taking the time to read this. Wondering if you had any suggestions for selling PPR format to a 14-man, 14-year-old league. You can see the roster format there, pretty standard. Only one running back.
That's going to be tough.
Good
because
advice.
of the age of the league.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of lawns that people don't like you stepping on.
Look, you get some ammo with ESPN changing their league format, their default
That's true.
league format.
It's the new standard.
To PPR.
Don't even. Here's what you do. I know we normally say
great.
you got to vote on
That's
everything.
not a bad.
But it's standard. You didn't change it. This is standard scoring.
Well,
now.
it's a great year to actually bring it up. I wouldn't auto change, but just say, hey, everybody, ESPN has changed what their standard league is. I think we should follow what it is because these are what they make their rankings on. You know, use that as kind of an opportunity to talk about this to your league mate and say this is the new normal. If you want other more practical advice, I would just point out, like, look at a tight end who gets one, 18-yard touchdown, and he ends up scoring, that'd be 7.8 points. But if you got a guy who, went 10 catches for, 69 yards and was super involved in the game, he scores less points. That's just silly. Now, I think PPR is too far. We like half point. but it's better than standard.
Ask your friends if they still use flip phones.
I was going to say the Model T. Are they cruising
What if
up?
they say yes, though, Mike?
That's what I'm saying. It's
If they say
just
yes,
bow out.
if they say yes, you say standard league it is. I'm finding another. I'm going to go to Foot Clan leagues and do that. All right, voicemail question. Another one came in. Oh, wow. Long one.
Hey, guys. My name is Tiffany, and I'm from Orlando, so buongiorno. I was just calling because I want to tell you, number one, awesome job with the Ultimate Draft Kit. I love it. I am kind of intrigued about the tier rankings that you have, and I was wondering if you could speak to how to draft with the tiers. I'm especially interested because my league is a little unique in that we have to start one quarterback, one tight end, but then we have 5 positions that are all flex, and you can do an additional tight end, and you could do I think it's limited to an additional tight end, but then you can do 4 wide receivers or 4 running backs. You can mix and match. And so I was kind of curious as to, with the tier drafting, if that is relevant or as important when you have a 5 flex option like what I have, or if you just want to go for best available. So thank you so much. I love you guys. I've been listening to you for over a year now. You rock. So keep up the good work. Bye-bye.
Buongiorno indeed.
We're moving into the States. If you're on a coastal city, you now get a buongiorno. That's a tough question, I think, because your league is very unique.
Well, I would say
Yes.
the more flex spots, the more important. I would argue the more important that the tier rankings.
Well, the
would
problem
be.
the problem being that our tiers are broken down by position. You don't have a flex tier breakdown inside of the UDK in the sense that if that's how she's trying to view it, how do you know, is a third tier wide receiver as important as a second tier running back? Or that's what the confusion would be to me if I was in a league of that format, because I'm not trying to fill those spots. But you're still trying to get the best available player. And so I think you can still follow that format. And obviously if there's a great, second tier running back sitting on the board, but you still have a lot of wide receivers at a certain tier available, that makes the decision
I was
easier.
gonna say my initial reaction for this league is running backs are not nearly as important. I mean, you have obviously the top 3 running backs give you a huge advantage.
There's no more positional.
Right, the scarcity goes away.
issue.
Supply and demand is gone. So if this is a half or even a full point PPR, I mean, I'm loading up on wide receivers.
What I would say, which is just valuable for people to know, I think if they're not aware of this, is that the top end running backs, the best running backs in fantasy football, usually year after year, they outscore the top end wide receivers. So if you can get one of those elite running backs, they're worth the most. But once you get to about the running back 24 and the wide receiver 24, once you get in that range, wide receivers score more than their counterpart at running back. So, I would try to get one of those stud running backs and then focus on wide receivers as you go deeper, because you're not going to be able to play the running back 36 and get points, but you could play the wide receiver 48 and probably outscore
Kelvin
the
Benjamin?
running back.
Is that Kelvin?
Oh. You get
All
one
right.
of those touchdown lobs.
Hey, that is it for today's show. By the way, we are going to be giving away a ton of stuff this offseason. Whether these two like it or not, I'm just grabbing stuff and sending it off in the mail.
I don't like it.
Do you notice you don't have a mouse?
I love it.
Oh, you love it?
Yes.
Yeah, you didn't know I mailed your mouse away. I autographed your mouse and I sent it off.
Is that true?
That's
amazing.
Keyboard only. It's going to be a slow year. No, we're going to give away a ton of autographed gear right now at FootClanGiveaway.com. We're giving away a Carlos Hyde jersey.
I still believe.
And so we were talking today that maybe after football, Carlos Hyde will come out with an app.
Oh, that's true. We were discussing.
To find the
Jason, you
nearest,
missed this discussion, but
enlighten me.
It's like a GPS-oriented app, and it's got all the local urgent cares.
Yeah, he's got them on review, so he's letting people know.
It's like the Yelp for injuries.
Yeah. Just called Hyde.
Yeah.
No,
I like it.
yeah, no, it's solid. No, we're giving away a Carlos Hyde jersey. Obviously, you won it, and after that endorsement, but we're going to give away some more. We just did a Lev Bell jersey giveaway on jointhefoot.com, so you can get involved over there as well. I saw another question from Keith in Texas come in. He says, do you guys have your ranked rookies anywhere? Yeah, we do. They're in the Ultimate Draft Kit, ultimatedraftkit.com. You can check out the Dynasty-ish rookie rankings over there, and we'll be back on Thursday with more good stuff. You guys have any parting words for the listeners?
I love you. Okay. That's not.
Hey,
All right.
it's true.
Parting. Bon voyage.
If you need a trophy or a championship ring, go to fantasyjocks.com. Promo code is footballers.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Join our fantasy football community on jointhefoot.com and follow us on Twitter @TheFFBallers.